Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Anthony podcast. And today I'm joined by Brooke Jade Millhouse. How you doing? How you doing today, Brooke?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I just said I've got a bit of a toothache, but other than that, I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right. It's been one of them days, to be honest. I'm all right.
We all have them, like we all have them. And it's like towards the end of the day now, so that means that tomorrow's closer and it'll be a better day.
Yeah. So, 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 uh, so the reason that you came over my radar is because you did an interview with my friend Dom Smith. So, so after I saw that, I thought I need to get you on. So for the people that don't know, you you are you are you have a podcast called Disabled and Disabled and Proud, Disabled and Proud. But would you would you mind me asking what is your disability?
So I don't have a right like forearm. They call it a congenital limb difference, but I didn't actually know that that was what it was called until like last year. So I always used to just say that I was born without a hand and that was it really. Um yeah, that's my disability of congenital limb difference.
So so what so obviously you knew from the time you were born that you were different. But what age did you start to appreciate it? 'Cause obviously when you're young, you can you can be quite you can be quite envious of able-bodied people. So you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been really confident in my disability. And that's not to say that I haven't had days where I've been like, oh, like it would be nice to experience what it would be like to have two hands. But even when I was really little, like I remember doing gymnastics when I was really, really little. And I used to want to have leotards that would show off my arm so that I would be like, like, I've always been very proud of being like not looking like everybody else. And so I don't really think I've ever really looked around the like general population and been like, oh, I'm envious or like I wish I was like that. But I think I didn't. I think I started to notice when people started to look at me differently. And I swam a lot when I was younger. Like I was really heading places like in swimming in terms of like the Paralympics, and that was like going to be like my career path at one point. And I don't think I really realized until I was swimming competitively and that people were staring at me and I wasn't swimming in like a power setting. I was swimming in like a non-disabled setting. So everybody there had two arms and two legs.
Yeah,
And that's when I think I was like, oh, like maybe I am different and like this is a thing. And I think when your disability is physical, like you can see it, you know that you're not like average Joe blogs or what the media portrays as average Joe blogs. And I think you kind of pick up on that quite quickly. But whether or not you recognize it, I think is a different matter.
yeah, I completely agree with that. So when so what so when with when did you decide, oh, I'm gonna get into fitness and I'm gonna make that a part of my what part of my life journey, if you know what I mean?
So I've always been really like heavily into sports from like a really young age. So when I was really little, like I did gymnastics and trampolining, and like my parents would always take me to like different clubs. And then as I got a bit older and like the schools that I went to, like you would play a sport for an entire term. So it would be like hockey and then netball and then rounders or athletics. And I got really into playing hockey. I played for county and then I ended up carrying on my hockey career all the way up until I was at uni, until my third year at uni. And I love hockey. I've got a real soft spot for the game. And I've always been involved in some form of fitness. Just because I love it. Like I love sports. I love the sport mentality. I love the competitiveness of it. And then when I got out of uni, I was kind of looking for something to, because like at that time, like you're finding your feet in the world and like you're trying to figure out like what life is without not being at uni, like you're no longer a student, you're no longer in education. And I didn't have like a sporting outlet. So like I didn't have a sports team or I didn't have like a club. And I was kind of like going to the gym and like the gym's fine, but I really like the social aspect of sports as well. Like I like that you get to meet people and like it's quite like-minded people and I ended up finding CrossFit kind of by accident and like ended up really falling in love with it. And I've been doing CrossFit now for I think I've literally just had like my 2 year anniversary of my first ever class and I now can't imagine my life without it because it's such an integral part of my life.
So, 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 so do you know the term? Do you know the term adaptive athlete? When did you start using that term?
So for me, I think I knew about being an adaptive athlete before I went into CrossFit. So I knew that like adaptive athletes in terms of CrossFit were up and coming. And I thought because I was looking for like a new sport and a bit of a new challenge in terms of like, my fitness, and I hadn't really seen too much about it, I decided that it would probably be like the best time to jump in on it and like get involved because adaptive athletes were only brought to the CrossFit Games, which is like it's the big stage really, were only brought in like 2021. So this is only the second year that they've had adaptive athletes like participating in the big games. And I thought, why not jump in at this point in time? Like it's still relatively new. Maybe if I got good, I could make a bit of a stamp on it. Or even if I didn't, maybe I'd still be able to help someone out who looks like me, who wants to get into fitness, maybe like by sharing what I do, it would make other people inspired to do it themselves, or it would help someone like me be like, oh, so that's how you do this movement, or that's how you hang off a rig, or that's how you move a barbell. And that's kind of how I got into it because I knew that there'll be so much scope for goodness with it. And also like I just love like running around. It's like adult PE.
Uh, so, so we always very active in that sense, like in terms of like you always have to be doing something.
Yeah, I always have to have like some form of an outlet because I think a lot and like my brain goes at like 100 miles an hour all the time and there's rarely like a time where I can stop that. And it tends to be if I'm in like a sporting situation, like my brain switches off and I'm like focused on what I'm doing in terms of like whether it be hockey or whether it be netball or whether it be CrossFit. It's a time where I can almost just like shut everything out, focus on my fitness. If I feel like I'm going to pass out, then that's like perfect because I know that I'm not thinking about anything else other than my breathing. So like it's good for me.
So, uh, when apologies when you do play hockey or any sport like that, are you one of them people that just like to take part, or are you one of them people that always have to try to win, if you know what I mean?
Oh, that's a really interesting one. So like when I was younger, I used to be very much like play to win. And like when our hockey team didn't win, I'd be really upset. And I'd be like, for goodness sake, like we could have done better. But as I've got older, I'm very much more like
The experience.
have like I want to be here to have a good time. And like I think a really great phrase that I use a lot of the time is like I'm here for a good time, not necessarily a long time. So like I might as well have fun whilst I'm doing it.
Yeah, you know the term adapt, adaptive athlete. Yeah, I didn't hear it. Like, you know what, your interview with Dom. So yeah, so has it been has it always been a term term then, or is it like a new term that has just been created, or has it always been a term?
I think so. From what I know of it, adaptive athlete has kind of is quite a new thing. It's not so like I personally wouldn't call like Paralympians or people who do, like disability sport. I wouldn't necessarily call them adaptive athletes. I but the term is evolving, but it is pretty brand new in terms of its start, and I think that's quite exciting because it kind of means it could evolve into anything, and
Yeah,
that's an exciting place to be.
yeah. So I, because obviously I I have cerebral palsy. So do you know when you were getting into sports, yeah, we
Hmm.
because sometimes parents with children with disabilities, they can be a bit overprotective sometimes. So your parents, if you don't mind
Oh,
me
my parents are
asking.
not like that at all. My parents are very much like chuck you into the deep end, and if you drown, it's your own fault. You should have started swimming sooner.
Yeah, I think I personally think that's the best way to be because
Yeah.
you can't wrap them up in cotton wool forever.
Exactly. And my parents have like always been like that. Like, don't get me wrong, my biggest champions, but they're also the people that will push me the most to do. Like, if I want to try something new, they'll be like, you have to do it. You've got to give it a try. Because if you don't, like, you'll never know. And they're so great at that. Like, I've never been like wrapped in cotton wool. Like, I've never had that. I've always had parents that have been like, do it. And if you're gonna do it, like give it your all. You kind of can't half-ass something. You've got to like full-ass it, you know?
Yeah. So do you know your mentality when it comes to fitness and playing sport? Yeah. Do you try and carry that mentality with you like your life?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I like to think so. I think like I'm naturally quite tenacious anyway, and it's very rare that if I set my mind on a goal, I want to achieve it, and I'll do everything in my power to do it. And I think that's probably like the sportswoman in me is very much like that as well. Like I will go after what I want, and like I won't really back down. Like I'm a bit like a Rottweiler when it comes to things that I think about that I want and like I want to achieve. So yeah, I think I probably have taken that with me and crossed it over into my life, and it's served me really well in some cases and sometimes it hasn't, but like you live and you learn.
Yeah. So so moving on to your podcast,
Yeah.
Disabled and Proud. So what? So first of all, did you watch? Did you listen or watch many many disabled podcasts before? And what inspired you to start your own?
so I so it was really interesting. It all came about because there was a government consensus, and a question that was asked on this government consensus was something along the lines of, would you agree or disagree that you would get into a relationship with someone with a physical disability? And it was like a general population consensus. And it was the way that you answered was through a tick box, right? And it was like agree, disagree, and then like all the every bits in between, like strongly disagree, strongly agree, neutral, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
And I remember seeing it and being absolutely mortified by it because I thought, how can someone ask that question to a complete random person? Because disability, as we both know, is a complete umbrella term. There was no specifics, there was nothing. It was just, would you get into a relationship with someone with like a physical disability? And I went on a bit of a rant on my Instagram about it, being like, I think this is disgusting. Like, you know nothing about the disability. How can you make that judgment call? You're completely taking away any merit that that person may have. You're literally putting it straight down to their disability. And if that's the kind of person you are, then you're probably not a very nice person and you need to go and check yourself. And the more I started like thinking and speaking about it, the more I realized I had quite a lot to say. And as I got more involved talking about disability, I realized that being confident in your disability wasn't a given for everyone. And I didn't realize that because I thought it was. I thought that every single disabled person was like me and loved their disability and was very secure in it and was very happy in it. And the more that I realized that that wasn't the case, I really wanted to share stories of different disabled people and their journey and how you can be disabled and be very proud of that disability. And, you know, being disabled is this like, it can be so incredible and so magical. And at the same time, like you don't have to always enjoy it. It can be one of the most annoying things in your life, but ultimately you can be proud to be disabled. And I didn't feel like there was a space that had that. And kind of got to the point where I was like, if it doesn't exist, I think I might just create it myself.
Why, why, why do you think some people are those that are disabilities? Do you think it's just a society thing and the way society portrays certain disabilities sometimes?
I think society has a lot to answer for in terms of how we view disability. I mean, like, obviously we have like the medical model of disability and we have the social model of disability, and I'm not necessarily talking about those, but the way that disability is portrayed in the media, like it's not really there. And if it is, it's a very, very slim representation of what disability actually is. And it's it's sad because there's so much going on underneath this like undercurrent of the term disability and what disabilities are and who's disabled and whether it's physical or whether it's non-physical, or there's so much going on around it and we're not given that chance to see it. And like I look back at my childhood and I never saw someone who looked like me on TV. I never saw someone who looked like me in a magazine. I never saw someone who looked like me in a film. I've never seen like a character that looks like me as a love interest. I've never seen a character that looks like me as as anything other than like a villain. And I think the way that that's portrayed is so like it's so bad for disabled
Yeah,
people. And
yeah,
like it's not fair. So if I can like show a little bit of good representation and diverse representation, and I feel like I've done a good thing for people.
yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Not directly about me, yeah, but but that's what I try and do either with this
Yeah.
podcast or my YouTube channel as a whole, to show people that people with disabilities do enjoy sports or do enjoy films or
Yeah.
whatever I want to talk about at the time. But but do you think because of the Paralympics, and obviously I'm not trying to take anything away from the athletes that compete, but do you think because a lot of people, the only time they they're they're made aware of disabilities or like from the Paralympics, and so do you think can they see all these disabled people doing doing sport? Yeah.
Hmm.
Do you think they develop uh, do you think they develop a stigma that all disa- all disabled people all disabled people can do sports?
I think it's a really interesting one because, and like I've said it before, um, is that sometimes it feels like the disabled community is kind of split into like one camp of Paralympics on like this side, and then if you're not in the Paralympics or you're not able to do like Paralympic sport, it's immediately pity, and there's like there's nowhere to exist in between. So it's either you're a Paralympian and you're an absolute hero and what you can do is incredible, and I'm not taking away from any Paralympian because I think the
Yeah,
dedication that they give their lives to their sport is unbelievable.
yeah,
But if you're not a Paralympian, you're immediately pitied. You're in the other, like you're in the other camp. Like life must be so difficult for you because you can't do this, and life must be so hard for you because the world is not built for you. And there's not really like a space in between for disabled people to just just be disabled and like be so fine with that.
In the perfect world, yeah, everybody would be treated as
Exactly.
human beings, but obviously the world isn't perfect, and things definitely need to change in period in society. But that's another that's another topic for another day. Anyway,
Yeah, that's a topic that I could go on for a really long time about.
anyway, back to your podcast. So, did you ever consider thinking? Obviously, obviously, you do interviews, but did you ever consider bringing in and I did you ever consider bringing in like a co-host, like like maybe get a different perspective, like certain things that you might not think about, like, you know what I mean?
So I really like having conversations with people, and I always, the way that it was always set up in my head was to always be like a conversation between two disabled people, just talking about perspective of disability. And what I love about my podcast is that everybody who comes on has a completely different disability. And like some people have the same disability on paper, but the way that they relate to it and the way they talk about it and the way that it's affected their life are completely different. And I learn so much from every single person that I speak to about disability because, you know, like I've said multiple times in this like conversation, is that disabilities are all so different and so individual. And it's so lovely to be able, I feel really, really lucky that I'm able to like facilitate that conversation for people, because sometimes people haven't spoken about their disability like that before. And yeah, I always thought that it would just be a really lovely conversation to have amongst different people, and I just love it.
No, 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 I didn't want to cut it out while you were talking.
Oh, no worries. It's always so awkward, isn't it? Because I've had it before. I've been like, and I'm like choking on my own spit. I'm not choking on anything. I'm trying to be really discreet about it, and then you end up having to be like, I'm really sorry, I need to cough.
Yeah. So, so I assume you never really did any interviewing before you started your podcast. So how did you find that interviewing people?
I've always loved talking to people. Like I'm that person that will strike up a conversation with you on the bus, whether you like it or not. I love finding out about people. So I think I've always been quite a natural talker. Like I'm quite a natural, like I love talking to people and I don't find it difficult. So when the idea for a podcast came around, I got really excited by it because I was like, oh, think about all the people that I could speak to. Like more people to speak to, the merrier for me, because I just love having a chat. Like,
Uh, but I understand that, but when I first started interviewing you, it took me a while to master, like, knowing when to come in and knowing when to let the person speak and they want some sort of role and things like that. So was that difficult for you or not really?
I remember the first interview I did, and it was actually with Dom. Um, Big love to Dom. He's like one of the most incredible people. And I remember I messaged him being like, by the way, just to let you know, you're my first person that I'm going to interview, and I need you to be really patient with me and also honest at the same time. And I remember doing it, and then afterwards, I remember being like, oh, like I really enjoyed doing that, and it was nice because obviously like Dom's a great guy, but he was also like, yeah, like you kind of have the rubrics there to do it. You just need to just develop your skills a little bit more, and you'll be absolutely fine. And what I learned from my first couple of episodes of the podcast is interview your friends first.
Yeah.
Interview people that you know before you interview people that you don't necessarily know. So I was quite lucky. I got to interview like a good few of my friends before I interviewed somebody that I didn't know. And then after the first time you interview someone you don't know, it gets a lot easier, and
Uh,
like you understand where the conversation goes.
are we are we I wish I had that advice because my first interview, yeah, it was with not with was with a sports broadcaster, yeah, and it was not a bad interview, but when I first started, yeah, because obviously when I get nervous because of my speech, because of my speech, sometimes I can get a bit rambling. So as you
Hmm.
can imagine, my first interview, you can barely well, I feel like you can barely understand what I'm saying because I'm so panicky, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
I wish I had that advice.
I can't remember who said it to me, but they were like, just talk to your friends first. Like make sure that you can hold like a structured conversation with your friends and you'll be fine. And at first I was a bit like, yeah, like I can hold a structured conversation with my friends. Like I don't really know what you're on about. And then I had one and I was like, oh, like interviewing is a bit different. Like don't get me wrong, it's a chat. Like at the end of the day, like we're just having a chat and it's lovely, but like there is like structure to it and you almost need to learn the skills of like tying in your structure to the chat, and that's something I think you just get the more you practice.
Yeah, like obviously with you, obviously with you, it just nice and that. But with certain people, obviously you have to make sure you read your time. With, cause I find when I'm preparing for an interview, I have certain I have certain points that I want to hit in a certain time period because I don't want to spend
Yeah.
all day. If you know what I mean, that's always that's always difficult.
Yeah, I think always knowing like what you would like to ask, and I can't find a better phrase, but almost like what you want to get out of the interview at the end. Like if you go into the interview with that in mind, somehow you can kind of extrapolate that. And that's always something that I find like no matter who I talk to, I'm always like, oh, like for example, I'd be like, I wonder what their favorite ice cream flavor is, and like I think about it, and then I'm like, I need to ask them, and like I end up getting it out of the interview anyway, and I'm like, oh yeah, like mission complete.
So so obviously when you're interviewing, one of the key things is being able to listen to people. Yeah. So is that a skill you had to develop over time, or have you always been a good listener?
Okay, so that's half and half for me because I love listening to people's stories, but I also love like jumping in and like almost having like a two-way conversation. So I've kind of learned how to take a step back and be a bit more of an active listener and not necessarily like dive in and be like, oh my God, like, yeah, like I understand what you're saying. And just kind of learn to be like, okay, and how is that for you? Rather than like almost getting too excited about the conversation because I'm a bit like a puppy. Like I just love having conversations and I get really excited when I get to talk to different people about different things.
The, that, that, so, you know, you tell your, you know, I assume you tell your friend what you do. So, what was their reaction when you told them that you were interviewing people with disability? Could they believe it, or were they like, you not you? I don't believe that.
Absolutely none of them were shocked. All of them were like, okay, like about time, like come on.
Did it give you a better? Because obviously, when you see people interviewing people, just naturally you might go, why didn't they ask? Why didn't they ask the question? Why didn't they ask that question? So since you've started interviewing, have you developed an appreciation for the way people interview people?
Yeah. I what I also love is listening to other podcasts to hear how other people interview. And I think now that I interview as part of my podcast, well, like that's the whole premise of the podcast, it's an interview, right? I now listen for like other interview techniques, and like I listen to when people are pausing and I listen to how the questions are being asked as well. And like some people with big podcasts, I'm always a bit like, I don't understand how your podcast is so big because that was a really badly answered, like asked question. And then others I'm like, wow, like that was a great way to ask that question. And I think there's such a skill to be a good interviewer, and I just want to like hone that in even more.
So, uh, I'm gonna figure out how to add this in my mind. So when you were, I assume when you were growing up, you had, I assume when you were growing up, it was, nah, hang on. Yeah, I know what I'm gonna say. So that, so had it been difficult for you to form genuine relationship either with friends or or love partners or anything like that?
Not really for me. I'm quite like an upfront person, and like I like to think that I'm quite like, can I swear?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want. We did read in the course.
So like I quite like to think like I'm a no bullshit person, and it's like if you like me, you like me, and if you don't, then that's like your problem, not mine. And so like, and I think maybe part of that is also come from the fact that I've got a disability. It's very much like if you like me, you like me. If you don't, you don't. And like that's your problem. It's not mine. And that's how I've always viewed my disability. Well, if you don't like me because I haven't got a disability, that's absolutely your problem and not mine. And so I'm quite upfront, and like I don't like faff and I don't like bullshit. Like I really struggle with like unnecessary faff and unnecessary like beating around the bush. And so like my friends are my friends and they're my close friends for a reason, because they're probably pretty similar to me. And when it comes to like romantic partners, the guys that I tend to go for are kind of the same as well, which is good. I don't tend to like faff about.
I I completely agree. Like, cause at the end of the day, it's not gonna affect my life if you if you don't feel comfortable being my friend.
Yeah.
All it will do is make your life feel worse.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not my fault that you feel uncomfortable that I can't clap my hands. It's not my problem. Like
The reason why I act that is because sometimes people are friends that they have been friends for all of their lives, yeah. But as soon as they get to the age that they become aware of the person's disability, it can sometimes ruin friendships. And I just find that really weird. Like, surely if you were friends with somebody from a child, you would still be friends with them as an adult, but I guess that's the way people train to work.
I also think like coming back to the media thing, I think because disability is not necessarily portrayed in like the best light in the media, like, and I'm not talking about like right here, right now. I'm talking about, like a couple of years ago, like when I was a youngster, and probably the same for you, is that disability wasn't represented in the media, right? So when someone who's disabled comes along into, like the non-disabled person's life, they don't know how to handle it. They have never seen this before. They don't know how to act. And when we don't know how to act around something, or we like, oh, I don't want to say we fear it, because I think that's a really loaded statement, but when we don't know, we kind of just avoid, like people just avoid at all costs because they don't know how to handle it or they don't know what to do. And especially when like you're young and impressionable and you don't always know what's right and what's wrong. Like I think about me at 13 and I was an absolute shithead. Like,
Mm.
so like no wonder kids can really struggle with it. Like I absolutely can understand why kids struggle with it, because at that age, like you're so young, you're so impressionable, and like, if someone tells you the sky is pink and you want to look cool, you'll be like, yeah, the sky is pink. It's not, it's blue.
And I find sometimes, and I obviously you would not experience this, but well, I imagine you would not have, but when you start going out to places, and obviously because I'm in a wheelchair, it can be quite difficult. It can be quite awkward sometimes, because obviously from when I was younger, I used to feel bad because I felt like I was I was holding I was holding everybody back. But,
Hmm.
but as I got older, I, ju- I, ju- I just realised I can't change who I am. Do you
Yeah, and
think,
I think that's really like you can't change who you are, and like you're with yourself, like the relationship that you have with yourself is the longest one that you're going to have for your life. So you might as well make it a nice one. Like,
do you think it's a balance between knowing your disability and not using it as a crutch? Because there's plenty of people that do use their disability as a crutch that could be doing more. You know what I mean?
I think it's such an interesting one because disability affects everybody completely differently. Like, as I said, you could have two people with the same, disability on paper, and how they refer to it and how it's affected their life is completely different. And so I think kind of accepting your disability to the best of your own ability to accept it, and that's completely different for everyone. I think as soon as you accept that you're disabled, and that's the part of the community that you're a part of, and like you make friends in that community, whether it be online or in person, I think just your life will just it's just 10 times better because you're not denying yourself of anything, and actually the disabled community is freaking awesome. Like some of the people I've met have become such good friends, and like it's incredible to have a group of people that I can talk to about certain things, and I don't have to explain as to why it might be a bit difficult, or like why it's a bit annoying, or like I don't have to explain the concept of ableism to some of my friends, and I'm like, oh, it's such a relief. I can just have a bit of a rant and be like, this is really ableist and it's so shit and it's rubbish, but I'm gonna change it and we're gonna do something about it. And my friends be like, yeah, I completely understand. I am with you 100%. Whereas sometimes, friends who aren't necessarily disabled, they're like, I don't really get it. And you're like, okay, like I know you don't get it, just know that it annoys me.
Look, I like like some like in that situation. Sometimes you just need to be able to listen to the person, and even if you don't fully understand, appreciate that it is something that they're dealing with, and just be a
Yeah.
good listener.
Yeah. And that's where like being a good listener like comes into play.
Like you, like in society, you're not always going to be able to relate to every single issue, but along as you listen to people and what their experience is like, and if the word is the right word, empathize.
Yeah.
As long as you can empathize with them, then that's all you can do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's so lovely about having a community of people who are like you. And I mean like you in terms of like they're also disabled. They will get your disabled gripes, and that is incredible. And then it's also great having friends who are, non-disabled, because they'll understand things that, everybody else goes through. And that's what's really beautiful about it all.
Do you think do you think having a disability or just having any form of difference can help you why not can help you I don't want to say understand but help you to empathize with other situations.
I think so. I think because like, naturally as a disabled person, like you're not necessarily seen and you're not necessarily heard all the time. And I think that means that your level of empathy is almost like innately higher, whether you think it is or not. Like you understand a lot more than I think I understand a lot more about marginalized communities because I'm part of one than had I not been part of one. And I think, a lot of people say, like on the podcast, one of the questions is, do you think that you've gain some understanding or awareness of yourself because you are disabled. And a lot of people do say, yeah, I'm a lot more empathetic, or like, yeah, like I've got really good empathy. So I would agree with that statement. I think it does make you more empathetic for sure.
Because because for people like myself, obviously, physically, yeah, I can't really do very much. Like, obviously, I can do certain things from the actually moving around and actually being able to physically do stuff. I'm quite limited, as I said,
Hmm.
but I think that gave me the motivation to 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 really educate myself in life.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And like I think it's really beautiful the way that, and this is absolutely not for all disabled people at all.
Of
But I think it's
course,
really beautiful when people with a disability, like, they do want to educate everyone else around them, because actually, and this is very much how I feel, like if I get to speak about these things and it benefits like one person, then I've kind of done my job. Like I've done something good, and like that makes me really happy.
I, and if and if and if by a chance somebody that is uh, somebody that is phys- somebody that is able-bodied, or what however you want to word it, find your podcast and then listen to an interview, it can open their eyes to disability, period, can't it? So that's always a good
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, and like that's, like I always say, like if the podcast helps one person, then it's done its job. Like it's completely done its job, because like having pride in your disability, like there are some days where you can wake up and you can hate it. And like
Yeah,
you can wake up and be like, oh, for goodness sake, not again. But actually knowing that you can be proud of that as well, and you can be proud of being disabled, because there's so much fight, like in terms of like like history, there's so much fight that comes along with disability, and like knowing that you're standing on the shoulders of other giants before you, like other disabled giants before you, like that's amazing. Like there were trailblazers before us, and now we get to carry that on for someone else. And if someone's benefited by that, then that's incredible, isn't it? Like someone listening to this podcast might see the two of us being like, oh my gosh, two disabled people who've got completely different disabilities. It affects both of them completely differently. And like look at how they're chatting about disability, and how actually like it's amazing. And like that may change their perspective on disability. Would that not be like the most incredible thing to come out of this chat?
yeah. The one thing I do want to say to what we were talking about earlier, I want to say that I don't think it's right to compare your to compare your life problems to other people, because
Yeah.
obviously everybody has a no, hang on, I'm not in the microphone. And yeah, got it. So as I was saying, I don't think it's fair to always compare your problems to other people, because obviously it depends. It depends how you. It depends what the situation is towards stuff.
Yeah.
And not 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 every not every injustice not every injustice you can view you can view you can view from the same lens, because they're
Yeah.
completely different.
Yeah. I would like completely agree, because it's all completely different. For every single person, it's completely individual. Like
Yeah,
everything about it is completely individual. It's down to that person and how they see the world, and how their view of the world has been shaped through their lives.
yeah, like I imagine. Well, I don't imagine we well, like for me, for example, people might look at my life and say I've had quite a privileged lifestyle in comparison to some people. So I never want to paint the picture like my problems are as important as other people's. Like, does
Hmm.
that make sense?
Yeah, it does completely.
So, so as we start wrapping it up, so who has been your favorite? Pardon me, who has been your favorite cast so far?
I've loved them all. Like I genuinely don't have like a standout interview. I think maybe the ones that I've learned the most from are people who have gone on to become really good friends of mine. And if it wasn't for those interviews, then we would never have become friends. And those are the ones that I'm like the most grateful for because at the like I've developed some really like incredible friendships from it. And I just feel like every single time someone says yes to being on the podcast, I feel just incredibly lucky that I get to hear their story and that I get to sit down with them for 45 minutes to an hour to half an hour and like just get to know about their world and how it works. And I feel really, really privileged and really lucky that I get to do that. And so yeah, I learn so much from all of them. I don't have a favorite one.
So, the, like, hang on 1 minute. So, 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 so for me, like, when I think like when I think about my interviews, I rank like in my mind, I like rank them. Obviously, you don't have to tell me what the order is, but you rank them in your mind based off of your interviewing in that particular interview, or you just say they are what they are. Oh, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I tend to after I've done an interview, I tend not to listen back to it because I think what's been said in the interview has been said and I can't change it. Like I can't go back and wave a magic wand and change the interview if I didn't necessarily love it at the time, or I can't like repeat something. So I kind of like let them be once they're done, and I don't tend to listen to them until they're published as an episode. So yeah, I kind of just let them be, and I try not to think too much about like what I've said in interviews because I think if I did, I'd probably get myself quite caught up.
And when and ever been an interview that really hit you deep, and you've been like, oh shit, that was really deep.
Quite, yeah, yeah. I can like I think I one comes to mind where I was like, oh wow, and this person had never spoken really about their disability before. And then like afterwards they messaged me and was like, so it turns out I've been through quite a lot and I didn't necessarily realize it until I was on your podcast. And I was like, yeah, no shit.
I do that sometimes on the very rare occasion people ask me for interview. Sometimes I would say stuff, and then when I want it back, I'm like, oh, oh shit, that person, that's probably really deep. Like for me, just to be hurt myself. When I was born, when I was born, I was supposed to be non-verbal. When I say that in interviews, I forget how deep that is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's funny, isn't it? Because I think, as disabled people, there's like a level of understanding that you have, and you're like, yeah, like, yeah, like, well done, or like, cool. And other people will be like, oh my goodness, like, I can't believe you just said that. Whereas other disabled people are like, yeah, like, well done, you, like, you smashed it. And then other people are like, oh my goodness, like, how are you still here? And you're like, oh, it's life, like, it is what it is. Like, it's not going to change now.
You know, you want you do either the podcasting or like the adaptive athlete stuff, or like do, just doing sports. Period. Do you ever the inspirational form thing?
Yeah, I get that quite a lot. Like, oh, like you're such an inspiration. Like, well done you for going to the gym. And I'm like, thank you. I am just living my life. Like, I think it's a really double-edged sword, isn't it? Inspiration and disability. Because I think sometimes it can, like, for example, Paralympians, what they do is genuinely inspiring. And it's not because they're disabled, it's because they give up their life and they dedicate their life to their sport and their craft, and they eat, breathe, sleep that sport. That is inspirational, right?
Yeah,
But like little old me going to the gym and just like doing a couple of press ups, yeah, I'm just living my life. Like,
I I I get that sometimes. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate it, and I would say thank you, because at the end of the day, if someone's taken the time to do to to I don't I don't want to be that guy when somebody says that, I'll fly up and then I'll fly up there handle, because at the end of the day, they just mean it in a nice way. And for a long time, I used to take it in a really bad way.
yeah.
But I sometimes think I'm just talking about MMA, or I'm just talking about football, for example.
Yeah.
Like, it's really not that big of a deal.
But I think as well, like as disabled people, things for us that aren't like literally as we were just saying, like you being like, yeah, I wasn't meant to be verbal. And I'm like, cool, like, yeah, now you are like awesome. For us, it's like no big deal. But we forget that like our reality is not other people's reality. And like our world and how it works for us in terms of like our disability and how we get around things and how we do things, that is not everybody else's world. And so like looking on the outside in, like, no, like, yeah, it is different. No wonder people are like, wow, how do you do that? And I'm like, I'm buttering a piece of toast.
And what you have to realise is there's some people that I've never met, never interacted with anybody with a disability, that
Yeah.
see me for the first time might be like, oh, he's really inspirational. And that's what I've come to it. That's what come to understand over the last couple of months or so.
Yeah. But I think it's like it's important to say that, so like for me, I think sometimes people are like, wow, like you're inspirational because you go to the gym, or like people look at me and they're like, if you can do it, why can't I do it? Or why am I not doing it? And something that I think is really important to say is that like, my disabled body and me and my disabled body were not put on this planet to make you feel inadequate about your able body. I'm here to have a good time. And if my going to the gym makes you feel inadequate, then that's a situation that you need to deal with for yourself, because it's nothing to do with me.
I Yeah, I agree with that. But what I also would say, on the other hand, I'm not here to be. I'm not here to motivate you either. Like,
No,
at some point, you have to take responsibility. You have to take responsibility for your own choices.
this is, yeah, exactly. Like, I am not here to motivate you. I am not here for you to make you feel inadequate about your body. Like, that's not what we're here to do. We're here just to live our lives. And if you find it inspiring because we're funny or we work hard, then like that's valid. I like to think I'm quite funny. So
I that reminds me. You've said before, yeah, that you don't feel comfortable making jokes like your disability. Is there any particular reason? Like, was there any particular incident that made you say, "Okay, I'm not gonna do that"?
no, there wasn't. And like I know exactly what video you're referring to. So I posted a
Yeah,
video that said, like, just a heads up and an FYI, like on my channels, like Instagram, you will never see me or hear me making a joke about my disability, because it sets a precedence for other people to make a joke about my disability or about disabled people. And that's not fair, because you don't know what someone else has gone through. You don't know what their disability is like. You don't know how it's affected them. And I also think like it can be quite below the belt, but also it's not very clever. Like, I'm someone who really enjoys like really intelligent, clever humor. And like to go straight for someone's disability, I think is just a bit like, like you could
Yeah,
have tried harder. Like,
in,
you like
yeah,
that's where you're going. Like,
it's
we're probably not gonna get on.
it's a bit cheap. No, I'm not
Yeah,
gonna.
like, yeah, such a cheap shot, and like I'm just not about that. And I think because of my like, my social media being about sports and like, talking about my podcast and talking about disability so much, is that I never want to like enable someone to feel like they can joke about disability and get it wrong because I joked about it. And it's so like, it's okay for me to joke about it amongst my friends. It's not okay for me to joke about it on like a public platform. That's like my
I
personal opinion on the
I
situation.
I understand your perspective, and I completely respect it. But 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 for me, yeah, sometimes it can make me feel more comfortable to make us. To, they like they like stab if I stab if I stab a I might say I'm doing I'm doing my robot impression because it just made me feel more comfortable.
Hmm.
But I understand what you were saying now, and
Yeah,
I completely respect that.
yeah. Well, I think everybody has a completely different take on it, and whatever your take is, it's fine. It's just not for me, really. Like, I really like really good, really clever humor.
Like no, I don't do it all the time, but if I'm like really stammering to make
Yeah,
to make me feel a bit calmer, I might just say that. Just
yeah,
just to ease the tension a little bit.
yeah. And I I can like I'm the exact same as you. Like, I completely respect like your stance on it, because I think like everybody relates to it very differently, don't they?
Yeah. But don't get me wrong, I would never go out of my way to make a joke about something else, because obviously that's below the belt, as
Yeah.
you say. So my last question is, where would you like to go with your podcast? Like in terms of interviews, would you just like to carry on doing what you're doing? Or would you like to get uh, or
I just
would you like to get Paralympians on eventually?
I've spoken to a few Paralympians on the podcast. I've had Sophie Elwes. She's a GB skier. She's a GB para skier. Well, she was. She's great. Um, I've spoken to quite a few Paralympians on it, and I think it's the I love my podcast so much. Like, and I know everybody says that about their own podcast, but I love having conversations with people about their disability and how it's affected their life, but then about disability in general, because yes, disability is a complete umbrella term, but we all have very similar experiences with it. And like, I love finding out how it's affected other people's lives, and how it's different to mine, and how my disability is different to theirs, and like learning about other people. Like, I genuinely feel so privileged that I get to have these conversations, and my hope for it is that it just grows and grows and grows, and it becomes like really big, and I want to be able to give it the wings that it deserves, because I think along with it there's so much scope for goodness societally. And like, I love it so much. It's like my little baby.
They So obvious. So would you like to do a separate podcast where you can do a bit more of your personality? 'Cause I'm not saying you don't do that already, but obviously it's very limiting when you're interviewing people and you're talking about predominantly their disability. And I think you got a really interesting personality, and I think people would enjoy your personality. Now, if you
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I like to think I'm interesting as well, so that's made me really happy. Um, I am so I think I've already promised this episode to a guest that's been on the podcast, is that this person will interview me with like my style of questioning for my own podcast. So that's like an episode that will be released like one day, maybe in the future. Because I think I had a couple of messages from people being like, we want to hear more about your story and like how did you get to where you are now? And like for me, my story is really boring because it's like it's my life, right? And like sometimes talking about it, I feel a bit ridiculous if I'm being honest, because I'm like, yeah, like it's my life and it's what I do, but like I don't know. I always feel a bit like, oh, like, am I interesting enough to be interviewed? Like,
I I always find it very therapeutic kind of when I talk about my life story. I don't, maybe it's because it puts it into perspective for me. I don't know, but I love telling people my story and my come on. And that sounds very egotistical, but I don't mean it in that way because
it doesn't at all, though. I don't think it's egotistical at all because I think everybody has an interesting story. I think you just got to be able to revel in it.
because when I first started, it took me a while to get over the online culture, if you know what I mean. Because obviously, people can be people can be dickheads online, and this was back in 2011. So as you can imagine, it was a real difficult thing for me to get
Yeah.
over. But eventually, I got over it, and now you can say now people can say whatever they want to me because I know I'm doing a good job.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, I always think at the end of the day, if you know you've done a good job on something and like you wholeheartedly believe that you did your best, then like fuck the haters. And
Yeah,
also, side note, if you do have haters, and that's probably a good thing because it means that you're standing up for
yeah, of
something
course.
that you believe in. Like,
And
if you don't have haters, then you're doing something wrong because you're appealing to absolutely everyone, and that isn't real life.
and the way to be is yeah, the way I look at it like if I wasn't doing a good job, nobody would have enough passion to send me any hate.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was like, I was very, I don't want to say I was very young, but I was obviously younger. And I didn't have the self belief in myself that I do now. So obviously, it's all about building as an individual.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, 100%. I would completely agree.
So my last question is, and what my last question is, what is the ultimate life goal and what's the ultimate podcast goal?
So I think both change all the time. And I actually like I'm someone that whilst I go after things that I really want, I think if I have too set a vision or too set a goal, it's almost detrimental for me because the pillars change on a constant daily basis. Like one day I'm like, I want to move to Bali and I want to live in a treehouse. And then the next day I'm like, I would love that for about 3 days, but I love people, so I want to live in a city. Um, so that with my podcast, I just want to take it as far as it can go and give it the wings that it really needs to fly because I think I love it. Like, and everybody says that about their own podcast, right? Everybody loves their own podcast, and like I just want it to do some good. like if it helps one person, then it's like it's done its job, and I'm so happy. Like I feel very privileged that I get to do that. And life goal, I've got loads of life goals. I want to like carry on doing my podcast. I want to carry on like building my fitness, and I would love to be in the top 20 again for the and like semi-finalists for CrossFit, and like yeah, like there's just a lot that I want to do.
Have you, have you, sorry, have you ever thought about doing like classes and in the future, like CrossFit or just adaptive, 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 adaptive athlete, period?
So I have actually thought about it, and like I thought about becoming an adaptive trainer,
Yeah,
and then
that's
I realized that actually I just kind of love the sport for me. And I think, sometimes you don't have to always like, you can just love something for yourself. You don't always need to share it. And I mean like in terms of teaching or like getting a monetary value out of it. Like I love CrossFit for me. And like I think I'd quite like it to stay that way.
I see what you meant. The way you worded it up there, it, it sounded very childish. No, I know exactly what you mean. I'm joking. But in all seriousness, thank you for coming on. And you want to promote your stuff really quickly?
Yeah, so the podcast is called Disabled and Proud, and you can find it like everywhere you get your podcast. The Instagram for it is Disabled and Proud Podcast. And yeah, give it a follow, give it a like, listen to some episodes and let me know what you think. I'd be really grateful. And thank you so much for having me. I've had like a ball. I've had such a good time.
No worries, no worries. As I said to you as I said to you in the beginning, when I saw your interview with Dom Smith, I had to get you on. So
Oh,
yeah,
Dom Smith, what a mighty, mighty guy. Love you to pieces.
I think I forgot to say this earlier. For doing your first interview, you couldn't want anybody better, could you?
Oh, I know. He's literally the perfect person to do your first interview with. Like, oh, love him.
So thank you for watching, everybody. Thank you for the support. And if you like the episode, let me know what you thought down below. Please drop it a like if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're watching this anywhere else, give it 5 stars. I'll be the same.
Yeah, you should.
So anyway, thank you everybody. Have a good day.
Oh, thank you so much.